I am unashamed. What about you?
So, yeah, we're
Lovely
super
sister.
excited. I don't know when's the last time we had you on, but we have Phyllis on,
I don't
our
know.
sister, and it's been a while.
Been a while.
Maybe
Wait, Phyllis. Okay.
Is this the first time that's dawning on you?
So you got to remember, if I'm not quoting a scripture or doing a duck call seminar, pay very little attention to what I'm saying.
Yes,
A lot of people have made that
we've
correlation.
been ignoring him for years, Phyllis.
That
but-
was our old buddy McIntosh who said that. He said, I noticed something about you. I was like, what's that? He's like, if you're not quoting scripture or telling somebody how to blow a duck call, don't pay any attention to what you're saying.
And Mac listens to the podcast, so thank you, McIntosh. That was really good advice. I
said-
hadn't heard that before.
Ouch. That hurt.
It was like the time the preacher told me, he's like, man, it must be nice to have, all your family as the leadership at your church, so you get to work at that church your whole life. And I was like, was that an insult? Are you saying I'm a product of nepotism? Is that what you were
They
saying?
came to me one time a couple of years ago and said, when are you going to take a leadership role here? I said, never. Too many Robertsons around.
I've been working at the church about 7 years, maybe. And this little lady came up to me and she said, son, when are you going to get a job? I was like, well, I thought I had one. I'm working for the church. And she said, no, I mean a real job. So whatever I was doing, she didn't think that was, real work. So
Yeah. Well, look, Al, I mean, we were talking in the last podcast, Phyllis, about the roles of men and women and, 1 Corinthians 11. And they had this idea of praying in their culture. I'm not sure what all the details were. I'm not even sure if we covered it, what their customs
we didn't
were.
get into that, but that's interesting because there were coverings, but what's interesting, Jason, we didn't get into this, but there were also coverings for men in Jewish culture.
Yep.
They had the shawls and they had a name for them. So there was a lot going on in terms of the shawls and the coverings and all that. So we dealt with it more at a macro level where it was people out of their role as a woman or a man.
So
Yeah, there was
what
a
I
lot
was going to
specific.
say, fast forward to our culture 2,000 years later, which we made the point that the important point was that are you embracing the role God has given you for existence here? And but I preached a sermon at WFR one time, and this little old lady came up. She's like, wasn't a bad sermon. I was thinking, okay, I'll take it. She said, but you're going to have a lot of explaining to do when you stand before God because you were wearing a hat while you were talking.
Uh-oh.
Indoors while delivering the holy sacred scriptures. And I thought, oh boy.
You got some splaining to do. I mean, that was like a judgment seat conversation.
I mean,
That's
and I'm
how
not
strongly people feel about head covering.
and
by
she
the way.
felt
Wow.
strongly about it, but we made the point of, I told her, I said, well, here's the deal. If I hadn't had that hat on, I wouldn't have been able to read.
Oh, the glare of the lights? Or why?
No, just because the hair's down in my face.
If he takes the hat off,
Oh,
it's quite
it's
the
over.
scene. Yeah,
a mess.
I've seen it before.
And
It's
so then they say,
In all of that, and all of this,
okay,
uh-oh.
provide
so
some
don't worry.
sustenance.
Don't
to it.
worry. Jesus Christ is talking the Savior of the world, who made us all man and woman. I'm not reading yet. I'm just giving this comment first. So do not worry, saying, what shall we eat? What shall we drink? Or what shall we wear? For the pagans run after all these things. What shall we wear? Jesus said, don't worry about that.
The moral of the story is, Phil, you're definitely not a pagan.
That's good news.
Fellas, we're trying to
So
help
when
you.
I say I don't worry about it, I really don't.
No, we
About
got
the
that.
clothes that I wear. But I'm quoting the words.
You're not really giving us new news, Dad.
Well,
We pretty much figured that
Well,
out.
I'm just saying, in lieu of reading 1 Corinthians 11, you may, and that's why he ended up saying, look, don't be contentious about all this.
Right.
look like, if you're a man, look like one.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a woman, you should look like one and behave like one. There's a difference, a great
Phil,
difference.
I've actually used that because when people have confronted me over the way I look on an outward appearance, I've said, well, here's the positive. Look at my dad and my uncle. Could be worse.
Generation by generation, it's getting better. I've seen your boys.
It's
Hey.
like the time I was walking the airport and Dad and Si were ahead of me about 20 feet, and I was, because I had gotten something to drink at Starbucks. So they were walking ahead, and as they walked by, and there was a woman and her daughter standing there. So by the time I got there, the daughter is commenting about the two of them, and she said, "Mom, look at those poor men. What do you think happened?"
What happened?
Well, no, but
And I got so
Willie was drinking a cup of coffee he just paid $3 for. And when
Probably
they walked by, they dropped some money over in his coffee cup because they thought he was.
With the coffee in it.
Chase
Yeah,
was
but the
there.
Oh, that was, hey, we were.
Willie's looking at the money down in his coffee. And he said, because they felt sorry for him. He said, poor soul. There was Willie there,
Wow.
multi-millionaire.
You know
looking
what we
a little
were
rough.
doing? That was in New York.
Yeah.
We were actually talking to a network about possibly doing a duck reality show.
Yeah.
And they said, yeah.
And someone thought he was homeless, on the way to the
Well, because
meeting.
everybody's walking fast
Yeah.
in New York. They see a cup out. They just got the visual. And
Saw the beard.
plop, plop.
At least people are still generous and giving and
Yeah.
caring. That's
Yeah.
good.
Take it as a positive.
Yeah.
You know, it was
yeah.
Like when Jace got kicked out of the Trump, he came in and we were all laughing, and it was
Well, the technical word was I was escorted,
escorted out.
nicely.
so we were laughing about it because we were like, "Well, look at yourself. Of course, somebody's going to escort you out." I mean, it's just it's a wonder they even let you stay here.
Well, that was the biggest thing is when the Trumps were trying to make it right. They were like, I mean, we're going to fire that guy and we'll take care of that. I was like, well, don't fire him.
No, he
I
was
mean,
doing
he was
his
doing it. If I saw myself in an establishment where it was pretty clear that I don't belong, well, he did it so professionally
Yeah.
and quietly, and I felt actually pretty good about the extraction.
But it's really funny because one night we were same hotel because this is where we usually stay. Steven Tyler was in there, and he had I'll never forget it because he told Dad, he said, "Yeah, I use your duck call," which was surreal, Steven Tyler. But he had he was wearing these weird looking pants and flip flops, and he had a little small dog and a pizza. And so we were having this little mini conversation with Steve and Tyler, and I was like, this is just almost, I don't take pictures much, but this is picture worthy here if I'd have had a picture of
Sounds
He
like
looked
it.
around and said, where's the cameras? No,
it was
not here.
it was a potential show. So Phyllis, you haven't been on in a while. You've been working hard, right? And but one of the things tell us about. So I understand now you're an artist. So you're married to an artist, but now
Wow.
you're dabbling. Are you dabbling? Into
I'm dabbling. I thought, well, when I'm off, the movies won't watch themselves and there's always stuff to do. But eventually, I wanted to do something else. And I really don't have any hobbies to speak of, I guess. Hunting season.
now.
Yeah, hunting season. I like to hunt and I was doing that. Otherwise, Tony's painting all the time. So I said, I want to paint something. I just want to have canvas and some paints. And so he gave me some tutorials and some basic principles of art and showed me how to mix colors. And I thought, I'm gonna paint something. So
were
I
you
started
good
painting.
at listening to him about it? Did you? Because you're not too good at like. You
so-
like to be in control.
I told him how I was going to do some things. And he's like, no, and then he's like, I'm just flabbergasted that you can, I've been doing this 40 years. I have a degree in it, a master's degree in
He's
it.
pretty good.
He's very good. And he's like, you just think you're just going to approach this and do it the way you want to. And I'm like, yeah, that's how I'm going to do it. So
Once more, she proves her Robertson DNA.
Well, and art is subjective.
It is,
There's
and-
been people who
yeah.
just took some paint and threw it up against the wall, about 3 different cans of it, and they said, amazing.
that's what some of it looks like. Abstract art. So I would say that what I did was abstract, but I wanted to paint a cross. So I started painting this cross and I started to kind of
place
think
to start.
about, Isaiah 53 and what the cross represents and how Jesus bore shame, guilt, sin, illness, and it's kind of messy. So it's clearly the shape of a cross, and I put colors in it and lines and just messy, a little messy, and named it Isaiah 53. And Tony's like, I think it's great for abstract art. He put it on his website. And we got a call or a
And
message,
what is that website?
TonyThomasArt.com.
There you go. Give a little commercial.
Shameless plug.
Shameless plug. So interestingly, this Messianic Jew, a lady saw this, Isaiah 53, and that's an important scripture for them.
Yeah.
And she saw it and messaged Tony and said, I want to buy this artwork. So I sold that cross, the original.
You sold your first art piece.
I
Well,
sold my first
congratulations.
art piece this week. So that's very interesting. Yeah. So now Tony said, I'm going to put it
So
on.
was Tony jealous that you sold your first?
He was so excited. He loved it. No, he
good.
loves the idea of it.
Weird is every time I've tried to get Missy, we just try to do something together outside of our kids or Jesus. It just doesn't work. It's not a happy ending.
We have fun. We've worked together a lot. We worked together at a children's home in Natchez as house parents. We worked together on the mission field. So we've actually done a lot of work together.
Maybe I need some pointers, like the top 3 things to get you and your spouse to just do something together, I guess.
Especially when we have different personality. That may be why. I'm a little bit more, like you said, a little more headstrong, kind of do it my way kind of thing. And Tony's much more flexible, peacemaker. That's helpful.
Yeah.
Give him the
Every time I
credit.
see you're behind the wheel of your car, that means you don't. That tells me you got control issues. You don't want anybody else driving.
Well, he drove all the way to Kansas a couple weeks ago when we went there, and most of the way back. So that was
So you're loosening up a little.
I was loose, and he was willing to, So yeah. Because the reason why most always is he doesn't get car sick, and I do.
Right.
And he can get his the hotspot working on his laptop, and he can sit there and do work for hours in the car. And what can I do but DJ, work the radio,
It's genetic. We all have that.
So if he's able to be productive, I can drive, at least have something to do, and he can work. That's usually the reason behind it.
If I start trying to read or write in a car, I start getting queasy.
Yeah, I do too.
I mean,
All the times when I was a kid, we used to have to. When we first moved down here, Dad was still hunting where he hunted, up in Arkansas. So we would drive that from here.
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking about having to leave out of here at 2:30 in the morning.
oh yeah.
I mean, it was a long drive. Well, I would get car sick every time I went hunting. And so we'd stop what is now the honey hole, used to be a little 7-Eleven.
Oh, I remember.
We would stop there to get some snacks. I would go out behind the 7-Eleven and throw up.
Yeah.
But I never would tell Dad because I didn't want to get weeded out.
Oh,
You know,
wow.
so I never said a word.
Well, let me tell you how that situation evolved as you got older. So, I threw up in the car, in the truck, whatever we were in. So then Phil would be like, get in the back in case you got to throw up. Back then you could ride in the back of the truck.
Right.
It was okay.
Right.
It was acceptable.
Wear a jacket. So I just, actually, I didn't get as sick in the back.
It was
with
better
the
with
wind.
open
Yeah.
air.
So I was happy with
I
it.
rode the back of a truck from Louisiana to Missouri when I was a kid, all the way.
I think it's
In the back,
actually
yeah.
illegal now.
Oh, I'm sure it is.
Probably some form of child abuse.
Oh, it's and everybody gets so bent out of shape. Like even just my kids are like, you don't even go to the driveway without having the seats. Everybody's got to be locked down, buttoned down tight.
I mean, I'm all for safety.
And I'm for safety, but at the same time, I'm like, I'm just going to Jase's house. I mean, it's like,
Well,
do
you
we
would
really
think.
need the full
I
Monty?
mean, look,
Mm-hmm.
I would say I rode as much in the back of a truck as a kid as I did inside.
Oh, much more.
Yeah.
Or on the mom had an old Ford with a big old back deck almost under the back window. It had enough where a kid could lay on it. So if
Right,
we went anywhere
right.
at night, I would lay back there watching the stars. It was a big time.
Yeah, I actually enjoyed it.
We didn't have a lot of entertainment.
The bar was low.
The bar was low.
Exactly.
Let's take a break. So there's a lot of free speech issues that are going on, not just here. Canada's has some crazy stuff. The truckers up there, they've been in the capital city. It's a crazy time that we're living in. And we know that there are a lot of folks out there that like to silence other people or cancel them. Dad's written a book about it called Uncancel. One of our sponsors is a company called Patriot Mobile. And so what they want to do is help you have cell phone coverage that is provided by a company that has a lot of the same values that you have. They support the causes that we support, whether it's religious freedom, constitutional rights, of course, sanctity of life. They're also really great providing discounts and helping veterans and first responders. So it's a great company, exceptional customer support. So check them out. They might be worth you switching over to patriotmobile.com/Phil. Or you can call them at 972-PATRIOT. You're going to get a free activation when you use the offer code PHIL. Now, and as I mentioned, they've got special discounts for veterans and first responders. So support a company that loves America, loves you, and shares your values. patriotmobile.com/Phil. So, Phyllis, so I want you to, so you did your first testimony, speech.
I did.
Kind of since you've found out who your family is, and so I want to talk about that and kind of give your perspective of how you think it went, because you were in Missouri, is that right?
Kansas.
Were you nervous?
I was nervous.
It's okay to be nervous.
Tony and I have done, we've spoken at churches for missions work.
Yeah.
Especially for Nicaragua, but other countries we've done short-term trips, and usually he takes the lead on all of that, but I'm there and I've spoken some. But this was me by myself in a church there Sunday morning, 2 services.
Oh, wow.
Were you wearing camo?
I was not.
Good,
I wore
good
camo.
call.
I just asked that randomly, because sometimes they ask for
Yeah.
if you wear your camo. And I'm
That
like,
that
yeah,
didn't
sure.
come up. I wore camo the day before because I hunted with them and
Tell
was at their
that.
banquet.
So tell kind of the whole genesis of the weekend, because it was a really interesting story.
It was so much fun. One of the organizers of an organization, a ministry called Hunters with Mission, they support an orphanage in India. They contacted Tony to see if he would be interested in donating the wood duck print that he painted for Miss Kay to their raffle banquet that they have every year. And they use that money to send directly to India. And he said, sure, I'd love to send you that. And because he talked to me about it, and he's like, these folks are doing this mission work, and they do it with a waterfowl derby. They hunt geese and ducks. I said, so they have combined hunting and missions. Like, I'm in on that. That sounds great. So we happily, said we'd, send that duck print to them for their raffle. And the guy said, hey, we'd love to have y'all if you want to come up here. And do you want to hunt? And Tony isn't much of a duck hunter. He thinks he might be more into it maybe next year.
Some people are just observers.
I think he's been sitting back and observing. But he's after this, this weekend there, he was like, this is a blast. I might enjoy it.
Yeah.
So we said, yeah, we'd love to hunt. Phyllis will hunt. So they put me on a team, because it's teams of 2 or 3. And you go out and you hunt. And then he called back and said, well, you're donating this wood duck print and you're going to come up here and hunt with us. Would you be interested, Phyllis, in speaking at our Sunday morning service? Oh, I'm like, okay, that's getting out of my comfort zone, but, I'll do it, Okay. And then he called back later and said, I forgot to tell you, it's 2 services.
Yeah.
I was like, whoa, I'm really out of my comfort zone. But we went up there, and it was wonderful. The organizers were amazing. The people that worked with us the most to get us there, Chris and Carrie Alexander, they are faithful podcast watchers. That every time a podcast, Unashamed podcast comes out, they're listening. It's part of their just part of their daily devotion that they do. And
I call them Notification Nation, because I didn't realize that people were being notified every time a new podcast dropped. But I kept talking to people, and they said, I got the notification. I was like, so you're going to have to explain to me what that means. And so they did. And I was like, oh, I get it. So, and they usually just stop whatever they're doing, and, the hardcore,
ready to watch.
They're watching it.
Yeah. There's a family there, the Bayless family. They started this. The mom and dad Bayless went to India and went to this orphanage and saw the great need that they had. And so they started out of their church. I think it's Lone Cherry Baptist. They're in Independence, Kansas. They started this waterfowl derby, and it grew so much, so quickly, that they asked one of the organizers, hey, can we have it at your church? So it was at the First Church of the Nazarene in Independence, Kansas. It was packed. So we had a great day hunting. And then we went to the banquet that night, and they did the raffle. They raised, I think, almost or right at $27,000 to send to India through this.
Right.
Great time. And then the next morning, Sunday morning, I spoke at the 2 services, and I was nervous. I've never done anything like that. So I put
Pretty
together my
cool.
testimony and shared it with them.
Well, you sent your notes to me and Lisa, and we looked over them. But, I mean, it was great. I had nothing to add. I thought you laid it out beautifully. And I thought it was interesting because you had a couple of funnies there to get things going. One time you walked out of your waders or something. I don't know. I didn't get to hear the
Fell in the
story,
water.
but it was pretty
Just
funny.
like when you get stuck, like if your boots don't fit properly and you get out in the mud and you're not used to walking in the mud, you can literally Just
It's
step
like a
out of
broken
'em.
ankle is how I describe it. Well, Jay told me he's like, oh, you're going duck hunting. We've got some. I'm like, well, what about waders? And there's not a lot of girl hunting clothes out there that are shaped for
really?
women. No, it's a weak market, I think, and more women are hunting. So
So maybe that's where you need to move to from your art venture.
another.
It means hunting
Women's
apparel.
hunting gear.
I would definitely be open to seeing what there could be, what could be done there because I follow some women's hunting groups and it's the number one issue that comes up with women who hunt is finding waders and other hunting equipment camo that works for them. So they said, Stone said, hey, I'll just give you Uncle Si's waders. He had the smallest feet. So that's what I wore last year.
Ooh,
And
that
so the
was a
big-
bold move.
Right?
There. I usually don't borrow anything from Si.
No.
They were new. They were new.
You run up on issues because we usually don't take women duck hunting, very few through the years, but when you finally do get a woman, in this case, my daughter, you said, well, what happens when they need to take a leak? Because men, whatever, they just, pee out the back door. But
Even that term is
there's a
so
log.
masculine.
There's a log out there behind you, about 20 yards. Get out there on the end of that log. It'll hold you up. So, it's,
Yeah.
Phyllis, have you ever used the term "take a leak" before you came to be into our family?
I don't personally use that terminology, but, hey, whatever works
Of course,
for you.
it's funny because I remember when Phyllis was prepping about hunting, that was one of her big questions. She was like,
Yeah.
because Phyllis will ask,
Well, that is a legitimate.
yeah,
question,
she's like,
huh?
what do you do when you have to go to the bathroom? I said, oh, it's a problem.
Well, and here you're
It's a problem
surrounded
for me
by,
too because you drink a lot of coffee and stuff, and you get
Oh, yeah.
wedged into these little small blinds. It's like, all right, everybody's just going to have to clear a path because I got to go.
Right.
Well,
It's surrounded by water. I dehydrate myself. Like that's one tactic is, the water stops the night before and there's not a lot of water and I sip coffee judiciously after a couple hours into the hunt. 'Cause I don't want that problem.
I've done charity hunts before, and even frog hunt adventures at night, and some of the people have been all women, and so I feel like a mom because I'm like, okay, look, I know this is awkward, but everyone needs to go to the restroom before we leave this dock. 'Cause we're out here in the wild, and the frogs. This is in the summertime.
Yeah.
And there's a critter under every log, and I'm like, this has to be an emergency only situation. So everyone go to the bathroom. They're all looking at me like, go make yourself go right now.
Right.
There.
Well, and that's the
when the waters around you are full of, you're looking at them, cottonmouth moccasins and alligators, you tend to be kind of careful on where you decide to squat.
Yeah,
This is true.
you're giving us some graphic
I'm
analysis.
just saying.
It's a lot of pictures and words
Yeah.
today. But we never thought about it as men because obviously we don't have to like take everything off. It's much harder for women. But we talked about this before, even with waders and like I said, the water. You don't really have a dry ground. It's not an easy.
That's
situation.
why I'm in
You've had
those
to
women's
adapt.
hunting groups because they
Well,
have
right.
great ideas.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I don't mind talking about them. I've told them what I have, so what my little technique is. So, but there are ideas out there for women who enjoy the outdoors, not just hunting, but hiking and camping and all of that.
So you've
those
been
groups.
through 2 hunting seasons now here, and so do you feel like you're kind of catching up to the speed of it all and kind of the how?
Speed. I am not fast. By
and
the
it's a
time I
fact.
realize that there is a duck there, it's dead.
Yeah.
It's gone.
I would say that's the number one thing when you're learning hunting because you're around people who are obviously experienced and the speed at which everything's happening. I mean, it's really like the equivalent of an NFL football game.
That's right.
I mean, you like, oh, I played some flag football at my church league, and you go out there. I'm just from what I've heard, and I think the same thing with ducks because most people by the time when they get up, it's over.
Right,
It's already
right.
happened because everyone else, the anticipation, they're functioning at a way faster speed.
But you're right. Oh, go ahead.
Well, it was fun in Kansas because one of the youngest Bayless son was there with us, our team. His wife, who's newer to duck hunting, So I felt like I wasn't in the company of you and others who just, muscle memories right there. So I felt like I had a chance, and I did shoot a goose.
Oh, really?
I
Okay.
shot a pintail.
Yeah, okay.
And they were
Yeah,
definitely
they have
mine.
a little bag.
Well, your shooting has gotten better. I mean, we had to have some. I forgot when that all happened, but I remember one day I just had to say, I was like, Phyllis, let's stop. Let's time. We had a timeout on the
Timeout.
shotgun. I don't think I shared this before, and I didn't want to embarrass you, but I was like, you know what? You're my sister, because I think somebody said shoot a duck, but you were so far off. I was like, there's a technique that's off here.
Mm-hmm. It was.
And you really, because you really just didn't have your head looking right down that gun barrel, matching the bead up to the duck.
It was just some simple tips, and I'm not thin-skinned. Like, that doesn't bother me at all to receive positive reinforcement,
That's what I'm saying,
criticism.
and you're good about asking. Let's take a break. So we have a new sponsor. I always love new sponsors, getting to talk about them. It's called Battle Box, and I've got the Battle Box right over here. And they've sent us a little more for us to talk about than you would typically get in the mail when you first sign up. But I took out one of their things that they send. These are like outdoor survival, camping, especially if you like to go and enjoy the outdoors. There's a lot of great stuff in there. And here's one, Jace. It's called a solo stove, which I thought was interesting. This would be great in the duck line. So you can, heat your coffee on it. You can cook on it, cook you some soup, whatever. It's a way to be able to do that. So it's a great product. And what they do is they're going to send you a box every month, and it's going to be about half the price if you had to buy all these things, on your own. So it's a really good deal, and it's kind of, like that excitement of showing up at your house. So from right now until March 31st, you get a free mystery box worth $115 or more with any subscription at trybattlebox.com/Robertson. That's trybattlebox, BATTLEBOX.com/Robertson. So you can get that free box to get you going. Check them out, trybattlebox.com/Robertson, and get ready to get a box every month.
So you can fix yourself a cup of coffee with that in the line.
Got your fire right there.
Well, I was going to say firearms are dangerous, and they can be intimidating, and they should be, because we should be nervous.
Dangerous,
for a reason. And the number one goal for a new hunter should be safety, because there's a lot of rules that you've learned that are in place where nothing bad happens.
Right.
You never point your muzzle toward another human being. For unloaded, loaded, you just never do it. You never have your finger on the trigger until you're fixed to shoot the duck.
Don't take your safety off unless you're about to pull the trigger.
Exactly. It's all in one, these kind of things. But the little things because a lot of people, they're intimidated of the gun, and subconsciously they're trying to shoot it and have their head as far away from it as possible.
Right.
It's like a reflex to, this is going to kick a little bit, and it's a combustible weapon. But you just have to get on in there and get your head down on the side of it. I tell people, you need your jaw to be sore a couple times so you have your head down on that gun. Because if you don't, you're not going to hit what you're aiming at.
Well, the tips helped. I mean, I have gotten better. I'm far from where I need to be. And the safety is important. I took a hunter's safety education.
Exactly.
How did I say? Hunter's education safety course.
So how about and you've introduced to another world when we get home and we decide whether we have duck fingers or duck gumbo or baked duck. Or
Grilled duck.
I love it all.
So you were introduced to all that, the consumption of what we're harvesting.
I really enjoy duck.
Yep.
Had never had it.
And we had to reintroduce her to deer because, like a lot of people, she had a bad experience young, somebody that didn't know what they were doing.
Yeah.
And so you get that. I remember it too. I mean, you got all these deer processors. I don't ever remember that deer processors when I was growing up.
It's a big thing now.
It's a big thing now. So you got people that kind of learn what they're doing in process.
Stone is aging the bigger deer. They age them for, hang in a cooler for 28 days, and they nice and tender, and I mean, actually, there's a growth that starts on them, but that's when they're ready. You know, when they begin to, you see the little blue on them, you say, okay.
Oh yeah.
But they're just as fine as you've ever put your mouth on.
Well, it's like aged beef. Every time I've ever had aged beef, it was delicious. So it's the exact same idea.
Yeah, and our oldest son, Grant, apparently he and his wife have become amazing deer jerky makers.
Yep.
They are turning almost all of their deer into jerky, and people are asking for it.
Yeah.
Really good marinade and flavoring. So, yeah.
There's a guy I know that up in Oklahoma that kills a lot of geese and a lot of ducks and a lot of deer, and he's been turning everything into jerky, and then he ships it overseas to our service members who are deployed.
That's awesome.
Which is a great idea. So
Yeah.
it's a part of a whole group that's been doing
Great
that.
idea.
So, yeah, because you're out there. Just one thing is you get something from home, and then
Yep.
the other thing is it's really tasty and good.
Very cool.
Pretty good way to eat that too. Mm-hmm. So Phyllis, you mentioned I had your notes, and I wanted you to tell the story. I'm not sure that we told it on the podcast before, but if we did, I think it's worth retelling. You had it titled in your presentation as the best worst Christmas gift ever.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us about that. Tell that story because I thought it was pretty amazing.
I
this is
ended up,
what you did early in your lesson. This kind of introduced you
right.
the whole idea of you being a Robertson.
I wrote it as a blog and kind of referenced it for that testimony that I did. But Julie, our oldest son Grant's girlfriend at the time, now they're married. I'm about to have a grandbaby in less than a
That's
month.
another adding to the
Yeah,
grandmother.
very
state.
excited. She bought him an ancestry DNA test so that he could see his ethnicity. It was for fun, and when he got the results back, it didn't add up. And we looked, and we were like, "Well, why does this not match what we've been told?" And I called my brother and said, "What's up with this?" And he's pretty quick to get right to it. He said, "Well, either what we've been told is not true, or Wayne, who we always was my dad growing up, who now I know is my stepdad, he said he's not your real dad." And so I've had questions before, and I'd even directly ask my mom, "Are you sure Wayne's my dad?" They were separated at the time that I was conceived, so there were questions, and I was different in some ways.
You kind of always, the way you described it is, you kind of always felt like something didn't quite connect, right?
It's true. And I don't, you just wonder how does a person know that? But I somehow knew that. And so the results, I finally did the test, and results came back, and that my sister had done the test, and we compared, and we were half siblings. And so, when Grant saw all of this happening, he said, "Thanks, Julie. You've bought this gift and opened up a can of worms."
What a great present.
Yeah.
Oh, darn.
It's both the best and worst Christmas
so
gift
it was
ever.
the best, worst Christmas gift ever because it ended up leading to me finding you and my, newfound family. I don't like calling y'all new family, and by now it's not even new family, but newfound. And I talked about that in Kansas, and I've shared that there's a couple of things that just kind of grieved me, like having to be introduced to my family. A person shouldn't have to be introduced to their brother.
Yeah.
That shouldn't ever have to happen, unless they're a newborn baby and you're two, and they're like, "Here's your new baby brother," right? That's normal. But to tell a 40-something-year-old, "Hey, this is your brother. This is, these are one of his kids," or whatever. That's just
Awkward.
sad and awkward. Yeah, yeah.
Well, and it's amazing because all the conversations that we've had about all the realizations now over the course of, because now we're entering into our third year of knowing this information, and how you discover so many things. You're a certain way, you think a certain way, some of your physical problems like your scoliosis and all that's totally tied into our DNA, because we have other family like that. So it must be kind of interesting in terms of just a discovery, right?
It answered a lot of questions and made me feel better about myself in some ways. Things that I maybe thought were a negative, or someone, why, you're so headstrong, you're so this or that. And then I get around a group of people with all very many similarities, and I'm like, hey, I fit here, and this is not so abnormal after all. Like, I fit in somewhere, and I could have lived my whole life saying, "Oh, she's just a Robertson."
Yeah, you looked at Jase and you said, and you said, "Boy, no wonder I'm headstrong."
It's true.
Turn it into an intervention.
Well, his husband, he's the one that Mom said, he said she never got his humor his whole life, so that's why they clash so much. But
They
You
argue.
never
She
got
said.
my humor.
yeah, that's what.
I was only kidding. she just doesn't interpret dry humor real well.
Right.
Now, my wife, she gets it.
Yeah.
I'm saying all this nonsensical stuff all the time, and she chuckles, and we move on. Maybe that's why we get along, despite our lack of hobbies together.
So let's take a break. So one of the things we've learned in the last 2 years is you really need to be looking out for your health and your immune system. A strong immune system is always good to keep you healthy, but during the pandemic and everything else that goes on, it's really important. And there's one of our sponsors is a company called Z-Stack, the letter Z-Stack. And they formulated this immune boosting supplement. It's got zinc, it's got quercetin, it's got vitamin C, it's got vitamin D, all the things that can really pump up your immune system. Dr. Vladimir Zelenko, Jase, he was the renowned doctor that treated President Trump. He's the one that came up with this. So really good. It's scientifically formulated. It's going to help supercharge your immune system, which is what you need. So you start taking it now, ahead of anything. Don't wait till you get something. You take it to help you not get something. So I take this product. It's helping me. Flu ran through our bunch. I didn't get anything. And I think it's because of this product. So go to zstacklife.com/unashamed today. Enter the promo code unashamed to get a small discount off your first order. That's zstacklife.com/unashamed. Use the promo code unashamed. Build up that immune system. So you shared the gospel and you used the symbols that we use. So tell us about how that went over with them.
Well, for visual, I had a little bit of not really a full slideshow, but some visuals in the background. And the main one was the gospel symbols. And that was up there the entire time that I spoke. And I did share the gospel with everybody. I asked ahead of time if I could do that. I didn't know how they felt about a woman teaching or / preaching / this was my testimony. But turns out that they were completely open to me sharing anything that was on my heart that God led me to do. So that was awesome. And I shared the gospel and referred back to the symbols. And the pastor just loved it at that church. And so at the end of the service, when he was wrapping it up and closing everything, he talked about part of my story and part of what I talked about was identity in Christ and being quote unquote illegitimate. And, and I told him I'm not illegitimate. I'm a daughter of the King. So my identity in Christ defines who I am first and foremost. So he brought that back up and a call to action to say, hey, you can be a part of the kingdom of God, answer this call of the gospel.
Yeah.
And so he had those symbols brought back up on the screen. And so the next Sunday, he used them again. And he even contacted Whites Ferry Road to find out if there were any trademark or copyright issues. Because they were like, hey,
they're probably pretty open to letting that be used.
I think so.
Whether it's everywhere, whether it was or wasn't.
The symbols, just in case somebody stumbled up on this for the first time. I mean, you have an arrow pointing down. You have a cross. You have what looks like a tomb.
Mm-hmm.
You have
the side of a hill.
Well, yeah, there's variations of the tomb. And then you have the arrow pointing up, and then you have an arrow pointing down.
It's very simple, profound, impactful, and they loved it. So they the next Sunday, he had them up. And then I had after that, the only thing I had were pictures, just family pictures, because we talked about how another thing that's sad, grievous, I guess you could say, is, being here around the family for the first time and going to people's houses, seeing family photos of adventures and vacations and moments, and all of those things are captured in photographs.
Reality TV shows.
Yeah, reality TV show. And I'm looking and I'm like,
musicals, books,
records.
it kind of was everywhere, especially at the lodge.
DVDs.
Yeah. But just eliminating all of that part of it, just looking at, weddings and those things. But, I wasn't in any of those photos. And I'm thinking that should never have happened to where you're just erased from the history of your entire family. And so what I did was I put photographs of memories that I am making now, where I am in the photo, and I showed them that. And the last photo I used was the one with me and Alex, your youngest, and Pearl, her youngest, because there's some physical similarities, and it was just to
DNA's
say
real strong in that.
it is. And I told him, and this is just so cool. Pearl, being so young, will never know a life where Aunt Phyllis wasn't part of it.
That's right.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's so encouraging to me, to know that now I am a part of things that are happening in the family. But these younger ones, they'll always know Aunt Phyllis, So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I thought that was really a great point. And I thought about that parable we've talked about before in different contexts, but I never thought about it in this context. But the parable that Jesus talked about where you remember where the workers get hired and they all come at different parts of the day, and the ones who came in first got the same pay as the people that just came in the last hour. And they were kind of like upset because they're like, wait a minute, why should we get the same? With the idea being is whenever you get to the party, you're at the party. Was the kind of the big concept. And so I love that you've understood that. You could be bitter about that. You could be angry about that. You could, whose fault is this? You could
To
blame
your
it.
credit, you have a positive spin. And there's some, a church cheesy line about God takes our messes and turns them into his message. It's really true because you're helping people who have the same situation.
Right.
I mean, this is not like this first time this had ever happened.
And the
love
issues
the
that I
text,
talked.
And we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose, which is a great text to look at when you think about these things.
Exactly.
That's exactly.
What was you going to say?
Just that, not everyone finds out that their, biological dad is not who they thought. They certainly don't find out that he's a celebrity. All of that is way above and beyond normal. But there are elements in my story that are, I hope, encouraging because the issues of forgiveness and identity in Christ and not being judgmental, those types of things apply to so many people in so many different settings. So I feel like it speaks to a lot of people.
Yeah, and I think some of the irony in just the situation, I mean, it just so happened in quotation, that while we're doing the show, or I say the show was being aired, you're on doing mission work in Nicaragua, oblivious to this.
So you only heard about it as a
You're not-
phenomenon, yeah.
So thankfully you're not tainted, because really the shock, I mean, I'm just going to put my viewer and listener hat on, and the shock of you saying, looking at a picture, here's the cover from our little duck show, and you're like, this is your family.
Yeah.
I mean, I think my response would be, you have got to be kidding me.
There's no way.
Is this the Louisiana hillbillies? I mean, what happened? It just because, pretty rough look, probably.
Outward appearances, not important.
Yeah.
Haven't ever
Well,
been. Haven't
That's
ever
what
been.
I'm saying. There's
So-
irony here. There's some irony in this. I do think most people would have that view on outward appearance and say, oh wait, there's been another mistake. This can't be happening.
Let's take another break. I want to talk a little bit about that, though, Phyllis. The way I describe it, so in certain contexts of when I go speak, I like talking about you coming to the family and our relationship. And the way I describe it is that God had to have had this hand of protection around you, in your life, because you had some tough times growing up. And so, I mean, describe, why were you so drawn to the spiritual when really nobody else around you was? What do you think do you think that was something in your DNA? Was it something about your environment? I mean, because you would find churches as a little girl
Really interesting. Yeah.
and just go on your own, right? Get
Right.
them to pick you up or get within walking distance. So why was that pull there so much for you growing up?
I don't. This is my thought on it. When I was conceived during duck season, so early 75.
Yep,
You were converted in the summer of 75.
correct.
So I was still in the womb when you were converted. So by the time I was born, you had begun to change your life and lead your family in a spiritual direction and attend church and Bible studies and practice hospitality and everything that came from that. And you were doing that as an example for your wife and your sons at the time and your household. Well, I think God said, Phyllis isn't physically in that household, but she is his daughter. And I think he honored that. I think there was a grace that just extended to me.
Wow.
And there is no explanation. I wanted to go to church. I loved Jesus. I wanted more of that. And we did move a lot. I would call the church bus. I would walk to a nearby church. I would, if I did have a family member in Missouri, I had a couple aunts that went to church. I'd go with them. And I just always loved to go to church. I went to Vacation Bible School when I was 9 at a Baptist church in Quitman, just down the road from here. There was a call to answer the gospel, and I walked up there all by myself, age 9, and talked to the pastor of the church and shook his hand, and he prayed with me the sinner's prayer, and I accepted Jesus as my Savior at age 9.
Wow.
And I grew up fast, and I feel like that was legitimate. I was 9 going on 20 probably at the time.
Because you were running everything.
I was a precocious kid, and definitely I felt like by then my brother and sister had left the house. Every one of us escaped the household as soon as we could because it was so dysfunctional. And by then they had left, and so I was the adult in the room pretty much everywhere I was with my
Tell
family.
the story about when you opened your first bank account. I love that story.
So my stepdad had a traumatic brain injury from a drunk driving accident before I was born, and so he was always, brain injured and had some issues there. And he eventually got on disability. And when you're a minor child of a person who has a disability and they get a check, you get a check for your minor dependent. And so he got that check in his name, and it says to his name for Phyllis, So he gave it to me, and because he knew how adultish I was age 12. He said, here's your check. This is for you. This is to take care of you. I said, okay. So I went down to the bank and opened a checking account and gave it to the banker.
At 12.
I said, I need to make sure this check gets deposited in this account, every month. And so he said, okay, but Phyllis, you're going to have your daddy come down here and sign this. And I'm like, why do I need my dad to come down and sign this bank account? That's my money,
Yeah.
and I can open this account just fine. Thank you very much. And he's like, well, you're 12. So he came down and he signed off on it. But at that point I had a checkbook and financial freedom. And I started actually working when I was 11, just bussing tables at a restaurant that my sister married into a family that owned a restaurant. So I was cleaning tables, getting tips, and kind of worked my way up. So I was working my little part-time job, got that check every month, and I moved out.
But you were that's what's so amazing. I mean, you were a godly girl. You weren't even a woman, even though you felt older. And yet, where a lot of people would have used the freedom, independence you had to just run headlong into some sinful life or situation, you never did.
I didn't.
And you love God and served Him. I mean, I just find that incredible.
Well, I've said before, you can use your upbringing or traumatic events that have happened to you as an excuse for bad behavior and bad choices, or you can use that as the reason why you choose to have a different life. And I knew for me, my personal testimony was stay in school, make good grades, and stay in church, have a relationship with God. I knew, I'm like, if I can do those two things, I can overcome this dysfunction and poverty and have a different life. And that's exactly what I did. God's hand was on me. Yeah.
And I do think that's one of the reasons why the transition of all of us living together and doing life together now is as smooth as it has been because of our commitment to Christ. I mean, Jay says it all the time. He and Missy have nothing in common, or initially at least, but Jesus. Mm-hmm. And so how that made everything else work. And I would say the same thing about us, because look, it's not easy. We're merging in, not only you and Tony, but also your sons, their wives, which is also addition to you. And so it's not always an easy or smooth transition, but it's been great. I mean, just, thinking about the alternatives of how difficult it could have been.
It could have been. And credit to you and Lisa. I mean, seriously, you two have been instrumental in making sure that, our transition here has gone smoothly. Right. You invite us to all your family get-togethers and include us and so much. And that has been a difference maker. And living at the lodge next door to you and Miss Kay, we can go down and have dinner, just visit, just stop in anytime. And that's been also very helpful. So that closeness, that proximity, and just being included.
Well, it's funny because one of our friends, Jo Neal Kirby, who's she's a PhD in marriage and family and all this, counselor, and she told Lisa and I before we met you in person, but we had been talking, and of course, they're some of our close friends. She said, well, this is going to affect your dad. Your dad's going to be different with Phyllis than he has been with the guys, with the boys. And I was like, yeah, right. It's like, Dad's got one mode, that's it. So I spent all this time with you, like trying to prepare you of how Dad is, don't expect him to be compassionate or super touchy-feely. And I go through this whole thing. The first time Dad meets you, I mean, it's like he was totally drawn in that you were different. And so I was completely wrong. She was right because I think it has been.
I put her face in my hands and I looked into her eyes and I said, yep.
Well, that's even when I saw the picture back when we were doing the podcast.
Yeah.
It was a letter.
By the way, we discovered your letter on the set of Unashamed podcast.
Well, yeah, it was after the podcast.
It was in your bedroom now.
Like,
the other place.
Give this
wow.
Phil, and you were looking through it.
I was reading it, and I was like,
when he turned that picture, I said, you need to look into that. There was something, I felt the same thing.
Jace was like, because I read 75, and you mentioned.
In your defense, Al, we get a lot. I mean, we had a lot of this stuff.
we get a lot of letters, not like your letter.
I didn't know, and I wouldn't have known. I didn't even know that.
You got a lot of crazy stuff. And so I just was glancing at it. And when I saw 75, I thought, well, there's no way because Dad became a Christian in 75. Well, 75 is 12 months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I was born at the end of it.
And
remember, I was like, well,
Jace was more like, I'm not sure.
But when I saw the picture, I said, you need to stop what you're doing and look into that. Right. I was real adamant because there was just something about it that kind of made me stop in my tracks. But you mentioned Missy and I. But, when you read 2 Corinthians 5, because I keep going back to that in our study, what God does is he gives us reconcilable differences.
Yes.
Which is the exact opposite of the way the world functions.
Because they say we're going to divorce over irreconcilable differences.
Yeah. Missy and I have none of those. They're all reconcilable. And
that's a good point.
Which I think is because of our foundation. I mean, we love the Lord first, and we love each other. And I think we have a dynamic marriage, but just from people that observe us, they're like, how in the world are these two people getting along? Because I'm telling you, all the little stuff, we cannot be further apart. But they're reconcilable differences. And I think it's challenging, and it's interesting. It makes it adventurous. And I actually enjoy hearing all these things that I've never heard about before. And she's telling me what she did. I'm like, why would another human being do those things? But she seems to enjoy them.
Which is why Missy is one of my favorite guests on our podcast, because Jace just squirms all the time. And it takes me back to my childhood of enjoying Jay squirming. So it's like, it's a very nostalgic thing.
Well, because I never have any idea what she's fixed to come up with next.
She makes you nervous.
Which makes it really great.
Makes me a little nervous. That's why I married her.
All right, we're out of time. We're about to go to the overtime, and so I just thought what I wanted to talk about in the overtime. We've been talking about 1 Corinthians 11, so I want to get your take as a woman on that passage, and especially growing up as you did. So in our overtime segment, we're going to do that with Phyllis. So thanks for listening today.
That's a new shirt we need. Reconcilable difference.
That's good.
That is good. That's a good perspective.
Give me
Excellent.
my check and my shirt.
Thanks for listening to the Unashamed podcast. Help us out by rating us on iTunes. And don't miss an episode by subscribing on YouTube, and be sure to click that little bell to get notified about new episodes. And for even more content that you won't get anywhere else, subscribe to Blaze TV at blazetv.com/unashamed.